Hi folks, this short video is how to test and replace an ignition coil on a Honda Odyssey. This procedure would be the same for most vehicles that have coil over spark plug. So there's a look at a coil over a spark plug, and unlike old vehicles that have one coil for all spark plugs, this has a coil for each individual spark plug, and there's a low voltage connector that goes to the coil and tells the coil when to fire. So if the engine is idling really rough, or especially if it's rough under power and the engine shakes under power, one quick way to test all the coils is to have the engine running and then unplug the low voltage connector one at a time. So you just squeeze the connector together like this, squeeze it together, and then wiggle it back and forth until it lets go. And it's really hard to do with one hand. There, I got it out. So there. So you squeeze this connector until it lets go. Now, if you notice the change in the engine when you unplug that connector, that meant that this coil and cylinder and spark plug and all that is working. If you notice no change, then you'd say, well, unplugging that coil had no effect, therefore something's not working in this cylinder, and it's probably the coil. So the way to do that is you check each of the coils, go around and unplug each of them one at a time, identify the hopefully only one that does not cause any change when you unplug it, and then to be sure it's the coil, switch the coil between two cylinders and verify the problem moves with the coil. To get the coil out, you need a 6mm hex bit to pull out that bolt, and then the coil just wiggles back and forth until it pulls out. So that's how you diagnose and replace the coil. It's pretty easy, especially on these Hondas. If you need access to the coils, the first thing you need to do is remove this top shroud that covers the top of the engine. They're 10mm bolts, and you need a deep socket for this corner. That would be the front passenger side corner, and then the other 3 bolts that hold it on you don't need a deep socket for. But anyway, you take those 4 bolts off, the cover lifts off, and then underneath it there is this cover, and this cover comes off with a 1/4 turn of those little plastic bolts with a standard screwdriver, and then this cover comes off, and that exposes the coils. So there's your short video on how to diagnose and replace ignition coils on a coil over spark plug engine.